David Holy. I don't think I've heard it from before. Hey, David, how are you? I'm a 44-year-old committed MGTOW, men going their own way, bachelor, and a recent convert to minimalism. I'm determined to stay that way and live a life of low expenses, low stress, and few commitments. However, I hear these 7th century savages proclaiming how they're going to outbreed us, and the statistics seem to be pointing in their favor. Despite this, I still have no plans on either marrying or having children. I'm a bit ambivalent on this. I don't want those bastards to win, but I don't want to encourage men to have to endure the physical and financial stress of a marriage and kids either, especially with the MGTOW movement gaining steam. Any thoughts or ideas on a good middle ground? When I heard that that smug guy talking about how, if you have 4 wives and, you might have a chance against us, and then another smug guy whose face was blocked out saying, hey, I have 4 wives. I have 22 kids. You have maybe 2 kids. It's over. We both know it's over. Why are we even having the discussion? They're right. Now, it's a little different here than it is over there. As I said just a few moments ago, in a socialist welfare state, which we are rapidly heading towards, you have to have an increasing number of people at the bottom of the pyramid. It's like any other Ponzi scheme. They had to import people. They couldn't find people who were sympathetic to what they believed in because it's all of Europe. The Germans couldn't import French people, even though they've been at war. They share the same cultural background. They couldn't do it because there weren't enough of them. So they had to import people from someplace, and they imported them from North Africa and the Middle East and so on. And the reason they did it was because they needed it for their social state, for their social welfare state. I talked about this earlier. I'm not going to get back into this. But the reason they had to do that was because their birth rate is so low. Their birth rate in socialist countries is well below replacement rate. That means that in 50 years, there's going to be half as many Greeks as there are now. And 50 years after, it's like a half-life. If you're not replacing yourself and your population gets smaller and smaller and smaller, you're done. Now, it doesn't necessarily follow that that is an automatic death sentence. In America, for example, we have a positive birth rate, not a significantly positive one, but we have a positive birth rate here. And as long as we're not paying for other people, as long as I'm not paying for 4 people, then you could basically have a stable population. You could hold the population. You might even be able to reduce the population, and it will stay stable so long as I'm not working for somebody else. As long as I'm working for myself, it'll hold up. That's what's different about us, which is why I hate this socialism so much, and it's another reason why it doesn't work. It's not sustainable. Now, with all that said, I think that we really have abandoned our primary responsibility to the future, which is having kids. And listen, I don't mean to open up this can of worms, but I feel enormous, perpetual guilt about this myself. I mean, it is a extreme burden on me. My life is just very odd. I was a wandering minstrel for 40 years of my life. I didn't get my act together until I was 45 years old. And it is incredibly painful to me to think that I am an evolutionary dead end when I think about what my ancestors went through in order to get me here. We followed our genealogy. My cousin Jack did it, and he walked us back to about 1726. And every one of my paternal ancestors had 11 kids, 9 kids, 3 or 4 of them died in birth, and I'm watching my line. I'm watching it come down, and literally it went from 11 kids for my great-grandfather, 7 kids for my grandfather, 4 kids for my father, and the 4 siblings, our 4 siblings together have 2 kids. And I don't like it, and I'd like to do something about it. I mean, I really would. I don't particularly like this single life, and it's not just a question of an obligation. I think I'd be a great dad, and I think we have an obligation to do it. If we're going to be outbred by savages and idiots, it's suicide. It's just suicide. It's all there is to it. There's no other word for it. You know, children are, what do you say that's not a cliche, right? It is the primary, it's the primary drive, it's the primary reason that we're here is because of that. And we used to cherish the idea of children. We used to look forward to them and stuff. And now for more and more people, it's just a nuisance. And it gets in the way of our stuff. But listen, as a guy who's been, basically a bachelor his entire life, just for you, this is just for you there, Mr. MGTOW, and I'm not telling you how to live. God knows I never want to tell anybody how to live. But honestly, of all the things I miss in the world, it's having a family. It just is just unbearable to me. And I feel like I've betrayed, I really feel like I've betrayed all of those people. And, you got the Charlie Chaplin example. I'm not dead yet, I guess. But it causes me enormous pain. And in this town, it's not exactly. We talked about this last time. I'm not going to get into the old dating situation in LA. So the question is, do we have an obligation? And obligation is not the word. See, obligation makes it sound like an obligation. What happened to the joy of it? What really, what happened to the life force? I really think it's it's the prosperity. It's just too comfortable. It's just, it's kind of a drag. Having kids would be, it'd be nice, I guess, but I kind of like to sleep late, and I wouldn't be, I don't know. But a society that, and the Muslims say this all the time, and they've got a point. They've got a point. They really do. When they say to Westerners, you've lost your will to live, it's obvious. You don't have kids. You don't think about the future. All you think about yourselves. It's a death wish, and we'll help you along. They're right. They're right. And this is the problem, right? If we were having 4 kids, 5 kids, 6 kids the way we would just a generation ago, we wouldn't have this problem. We wouldn't have an immigration problem. We wouldn't have a cultural problem. If Europe was doing it, they wouldn't have to have imported all these people and this internal cancer that is not going to be cleaned out unless there is an enormous amount of blood. And I don't think, frankly, Europe has it in it. I don't think they'll fight. I think they'll submit. We're a little different here. I hope we are. But the reason I took the question, and again, David, I don't want to come down on you, man. I'm 12 years further down the road you're on, but I'm damn tired of it. And it's not just a question of me personally being tired of it. I am, I think I really feel strongly, and more strongly every day, that we talk so many times. We talk in this country and in this culture about what we owe our children. We owe our children. We owe our children. We owe our children. That's nice. It's nice, and it's true. But we also owe our ancestors. When I think about the generations, and we only go back to 6, 7, 8 generations. I mean, go back to first cell division when you really want to get down to it. When you think about the sacrifices that my I don't want to say ancestors, even just my great-great-grandparents made. The sacrifices. They're working in coal mines. They're cotton carders. They're doing this all day with two flat pieces of wood and wire things. They're straightening out cotton, and they're doing it 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. And they're living in freezing conditions in factories and mills in Lancashire and Wigham and all of that just for their kids. And and prior to that they were coal miners, and then they were plumbers, and and then they were. Then my grandfather was a bleeding edge technology guy. He hung telephone wires, and my father was a hotel manager, and here I am, an internet pundit, voice of a generation. And the more prosperous we get, and the more successful we get, the more intelligent we get, the more sympathetic we get, the better parents we would be, the fewer kids we have. I can't say the better parents we would be. My grandparents and great-grandparents, I've told this story before, I'm just going to add it because it's a great story. Everybody's heard the expression, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is connecting to my personal history of white privilege. Not many people know where that story came from. But here's where it came from. And this happened to my direct ancestors who were coal miners in Britain. Without hot running water, people would take a bath probably once a week in an iron bathtub. And you had these harsh lye soaps, but in order to get clean, because you've got a week of coal grime on you, so the water had to be hot, and that meant that the water had to be heated over a wooden stove and had to be poured into this iron thing, and it took a hell of a long time. It's not something you just go and do and turn on the tap. It was a big deal. It was a major event, taking a bath once a week. And so, who went first? Well, Dad had to go first, because Dad has got coal dust in every pore of his body. He has to go first while the water's hot, because he's got to get this out of him. So Dad gets in the bathtub. And he takes a bath and he washes off, and all of this coal and all of this soot and grime and sweat goes into the bathtub. We don't pull the plug and then refill the bathtub. That's not going to happen. So Mom gets into the tub filled with dirty water, and she washes off and makes it even dirtier. And then the kids get into the bathtub filled with the filthy black water that looks like India ink at this point, and they wash off and they get done. And finally, the last person to get cleaned up is the baby. And the reason you would say don't throw the baby out with the bathwater is because the bathwater was opaque black. It was black. It was India ink black from coal and filth and dirt. You wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater because the baby's going to disappear in the bathwater. It's not clear water anymore. As the baby's disappeared into this sea of India ink, and you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater because the baby could be disappearing under the surface of this thing and you never know it. That's where the expression comes from. And when I think about the number of people, the generations of my personal ancestors that went through that kind of life in order to get me here, and you know, this is something no one ever thinks about. But everybody who's alive today is descended from the first cell division in the primordial oceans of the earth. I mean, think about it. You don't just go back to Lancashire. You don't just go back to Homo sapiens. You go back to the beginning. You follow this tree of people that were your ancestors, and you go all the way back to these fish coming out of the water, and it's a freaking miracle. It's a miracle, and here you are, and it's going to stop here. It's disgraceful. It just drives me nuts. You wouldn't think it'd be this hard. Anyway.